This bedroom should have a walk-in wardrobe, but the structure of the house makes that almost impossible. So instead, I built a full wall of wardrobes, hid storage inside the roof, and somehow made this awkward ceiling disappear. This should be the best bedroom in the house. It's upstairs, it's the only bedroom on this level, and it has its own bathroom. So it should feel like a proper master suite, but it doesn't. Instead, we've got two awkward wardrobes taking up the entire north wall, a messy ceiling beam drawing your eye for all the wrong reasons, and somehow the best wall in the room doesn't even have a window. So if this is the master bedroom, why does it feel like the worst one in the house? This wall is the biggest issue. Two separate wardrobes running wall to wall along the north side of the room. They technically provide storage, but they're ugly, awkward to access, and worst of all, they sit exactly where the best window should be. And then there's the ceiling. It's framed around the structural beam on one side, which creates this awkward change in ceiling height. Your eyes go straight to it and not in a good way. In a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, you'd normally expect the master suite to have a walk-in wardrobe. That was my first instinct here too. But once I started really looking at the structure, that idea fell apart pretty quickly. The bedroom is a good size, but not big enough to carve out space for a walk-in wardrobe. Also, the master suite is on the 2nd floor, and any additional floor area would require major structural work. That quickly turns into a much bigger project. So instead of forcing a walk-in wardrobe where it doesn't belong, I came up with a different plan. A full wall of built-in wardrobes, full height cabinetry, sliding doors, something that feels deliberate and integrated into the room. And instead of putting them on the main wall, I'm relocating them to the side of the room with the lower ceiling. That solves 3 problems at once. It cleans up the messy ceiling geometry, it uses space that was awkward anyway, and it frees up the north wall for what really matters, light and view. And to make up for losing out on a walk-in wardrobe, I'm adding hidden storage inside the eaves. But the wardrobes weren't actually the hardest part of this project. At one point, I realized the floor was out by almost 20 millimeters, which doesn't sound like much, but when your wardrobe doors run on a floor track, it becomes a pretty big problem. I'll show you how I solved that later. The first part of the project was building storage inside the eaves. The west wall of the bedroom is set back about 1.5 meters from the exterior wall below, which creates this unused attic beside it. It's not full height, but it's perfect for things like luggage, sports gear, and bulkier items you don't need every day. There's also a structural post in the wall that carries load from the beam above that naturally created a good location for an access door. And the spot works well for a few reasons. It keeps plenty of wall space either side for structural bracing. It lines up with the ridgeline of the lower roof, which lets the storage door be as tall as possible. And it lands in a circulation area in the room clear of the bed and side tables. Inside the space, I needed to frame out a small floor structure and work around a roof truss that added a bit of a challenge. But I actually started this part earlier when I was renovating the downstairs kitchen and dining room. At that stage, I had access from below, which made the job a little bit easier. This space doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to be clean, functional, and vermin-proof. So I line the walls with plywood. There are a couple of reasons for that. First, it's quick and inexpensive, and second, I left the screws exposed, so if I ever need to access the adjacent ceiling space, I can remove panels easily. This space sits directly above the main switchboard of the house, so there's a chance I might need to access wiring located here in the future. Because the storage space now forms part of the building envelope, I also insulated around it. I installed blocking to create space for insulation between the roof and the lining, added insulation, and sealed everything up. I also got a bit lucky, there was a lighting cable running nearby in the wall, so I tapped into that and gave the storage space its own light, which adds to its functionality. The wardrobe ended up being both one of the first and last things I worked on in this bedroom renovation. I needed to start here because I needed to build the wardrobes so that I had somewhere to store everything before demolishing the old wardrobes. This messy beam has annoyed me ever since we bought the house, and this is finally where it disappears. I framed a drop section of ceiling above the wardrobe using metal ceiling battens. They're quick to install and much easier to get perfectly level than timber. Once lined with plasterboard, the transformation becomes obvious. The messy ceiling lines disappear, and the whole wall and ceiling lines suddenly feel intentional. Once I removed the window from the wall where the new wardrobes would go, I started lining the walls here. This wall actually needs to act as a bracing element. I've used 7mm plywood here to maximize strength, because I can't add bracing on the other side due to the roof. Because the wardrobes will completely cover this wall, I don't need to cover it with a layer of plasterboard. Adding bracing to this wall helps balance out any strength lost by cutting the large window opening into the opposite north wall. The nailing pattern for the plywood is 150mm around the edges of the wall and 300mm through the middle, straight out of the install manual. Really make sure you get your measurements correct. I had to go and buy another sheet today because I cut one too short. 1105. I cut it at 1005. It's like a classic mistake. I've done it before, not very often, but it's really annoying when you stuff up. A good hack, if you're flying solo like me, pop your sheets in the final position and measure the gap at the top on both sides with some of these handy little packers that come in a range of thicknesses. And then, while it's still on the ground, check my packers at the top to get the right size. I'm planning about a 10mm gap at the floor, so my packers are near that thickness. I pop the packers on the floor on each side, and then this holds the sheet tight to the ceiling. Then I can fix it off without struggling to hold the sheet up and attach it at the same time. Use my claw here to get under there, hold it up, slip underneath my packer on that side to the wall, back on it. Should be getting pretty snug now at the top, so it should hold itself. Just need that. The same on this side. My gaps down both sides are good. Now nail across the top. Start with a few nails and don't hit them home just yet. Check your alignment before committing. Once you have a couple of nails at the top, holding the sheet in, remove your packers at the bottom before nailing off the whole sheet. Otherwise, the packers can get a little tight and difficult to remove. This is the point, take your packers out. This was also the time to plan power. I installed 2 outlets inside the wardrobes for charging devices and things like that. And I ran a low voltage cable that I will power LED lighting in front of the wardrobe later. With renovations, planning ahead is everything. I installed plasterboard to the 2 side walls that will continue around the rest of the room later, and plastered and painted the area ready to install the cabinets. I also painted a line of black around the walls and ceilings where the cabinets will meet them with some black trim later. One thing you learn pretty quickly with renovations, nothing is square or level. Then I checked the floor, and that's when I realized something. It was out by about 20mm across this section, which doesn't sound like much, but for sliding wardrobe doors that run on a floor track, it's a bit of a big problem. My brain immediately goes into renovator panic mode. Because the doors roll on the bottom track, they engage with a guide at the top, but they don't hang from it, so the floor level really matters. And according to the installation instructions, this amount of slope was well outside the recommended tolerances. And I don't want the doors just opening by themselves. After a bit of back and forth with Shaz and a fair amount of me standing here, looking at the floor and scratching my head, I came up with a solution. Instead of fixing the floor, I built something else. A plinth. Basically, a raised platform that creates a perfectly level surface for the wardrobes and door track to sit on. The room will have 60mm skirting boards, so I aimed for a similar height for the plinth. That way, it hides the floor variation and visually blends into the trim. I built it using flooring grade particle board. I cut panels sized to fit the wardrobe and door track. The offcuts were perfect for creating packers underneath. I positioned those packers directly above the floor structure below, then used plastic leveling shims to dial everything in. It's much easier to level the packers first and then place the flooring on top than trying to level everything afterwards. Once I was happy with the position, I fixed the plinth down through the packers into the structure below. Now I had perfectly level surface to install the wardrobes onto. Leveled up. For the wardrobe units, we used IKEA PAX units. They're a cost-effective option that still looks pretty premium, especially in the oak finish. I'm not sponsored by IKEA, but we've used them before and been really happy with them. I built custom cabinetry before, but it's not always cheaper, and building everything from scratch slows the project down a lot. These go together quickly. Between the two of us, we assembled all these units in an afternoon. I used 500mm units and one 750mm unit to maximize the available space. 3 each, with Shaz claiming the bigger hanging section. Fair enough. Once the cabinets were fixed in position, I scribed some small pieces of black trim between them and the ceiling and walls to close off the gaps. The cabinets got filled up with our clothes, and the rest of the room renovation took over for a while. Insulating, lining walls, sanding, and painting. It was finally time to finish off the wardrobes now that the doors would be safe from renovation damage. The first step was installing some plumbed side trims for the doors to stop against, painted black like the rest of the trim. Daz decided it was time to test the room's acoustics.
Sleep and sweat, the mirror's cold. See my face is growing old.
The sliding doors are also IKEA, but a separate system.
SYTTA. I don't know how you say that. SYTTA. Scooter.
My first time installing these, so there was a bit of head scratching along the way. The aluminium tracks needed to be cut to length, which was easy enough using a timber chop saw. The tracks joined together with little metal joining ferrules that fit into the channels in the back of the track. I tapped them halfway into one side, tapped the two tracks together, and then flipped the joined tracks upside down and tapped on a screwdriver to nudge the ferrule back so that it was centered between the two pieces. The bottom track sticks directly to the plinth with some double-sided tape. The top track mounts to a timber piece with built-in adjusters that allow you to level it independently of the ceiling, which is a clever system, especially in renovation work where nothing is perfectly straight. I fixed the timber pieces to the steel ceiling framing. The adjusters are threaded into the timber and leveled using a huge provided Allen key. The aluminium head track is cut and joined with ferrules the same way as the bottom track was. The aluminium track is fixed to the timber headpiece with screws from the side and a few from the bottom. Before installing the head track, the door stops and soft close mechanisms need to be installed into the tracks. The doors roll on the bottom track and have plastic guides that slide up into the top track into the soft close mechanisms in the head track. The doors were pretty easy to assemble following the instructions. The frames screw together and the horizontal elements clip in place. The panels are then clipped into the door frames by opening up and closing clips built into the frames. Some final touches now with some aluminium fascia pieces that clip to the back and front of the head track to pretty it up. I also added some painted black trim, one piece that I needed to scribe between the base track and units, and another piece across the ceiling to hide the gap between the fascia and the ceiling. finished result. And just like that, the wardrobe is finished. The doors have soft close built into the top track. It's a pretty trick system. The doors even soft close to each other when they share a track. We chose mirrors on some of the doors for Shaz to check herself out before a hot day. Inside, we've added drawers, shelves, and hanging space to maximize functionality. And even a small glass shelf detail under the power points to give the wardrobes a little bit of bling. We originally wanted a walk-in wardrobe, but honestly, the setup works incredibly well. And when you combine it with the hidden storage in the eaves, it does everything a walk-in wardrobe would do, just in a different way. I'm curious what you would have done here. Would you have tried to force a walk-in wardrobe into the space? Or gone with something like this instead? Let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed watching Kiwi Dads getting it done, eh?